Good afternoon. I'm Erin LaFramboise. I'm the Director of Library Services at Medicine Spring Library here at Blackfoot Community College. And today I'm going to be talking about living lessons connecting art and food sovereignty in the library. Two things that I'm pretty passionate about. So, I think oftentimes we ask ourselves, how do we perpetuate this knowledge? How do we get this information out there? And sometimes people come in and they're like, what does art have to do with the library? What does gardening, what does having, cooking and food in the library, why is that, aren't libraries just for books? And I often think of libraries as being places where you find connection and also where you find knowledge. And not all knowledge is in a book. And especially in our community, a lot of the learning methods and the teaching methods are oral, hands-on. And so some of this information you'll never be able to find in a book to replicate what we're doing in the library. And as we go through, I'll just kind of point out all of these pictures. So this is during a parfleche making workshop that we had in March. And while that's not in my garden, I'm very interested in foraging and having more information about that. And so those are prickly pear cactuses out on by 2 Medicine. So what does Medicine Spring Library do? We're not just an academic library. We're also the community library for the Blackfeet Reservation, and we have Blackfeet Archives. Because we're the library for the reservation, I really take that seriously in how do we meet the needs of our entire community while meeting the needs of our students. And so I really think about the gardening, the art, as ways of meeting some of those needs in ways that people get excited, they're kind of passionate about it. And so showing some of these pictures are things that the library has done. Well, this one, especially with the tea garden that I have, while I was president last year, I was still needing to dry all of my mint, my sage. And so anyone who was having a meeting with me while I was preparing it, I made them sit down and help. So that really created connection beyond, having a meeting with the president of the college. It was, we were connecting on a level that I feel like is so much more meaningful. And it wasn't, someone here meeting with someone here. We were meeting at the same place. I think I brought that philosophy from the library to the president's office and then back to the library again. Community is always super important. The library hosted Days of Beginning about 5 or 6 years ago. And so one of the sessions we had was a lodge raising exercise. So those are a lot of our students out there helping with the lodge. Talking about gardening and food sovereignty, we're always trying something different, and I'll talk a little more on that in the next couple slides, but this is part of our garden we had last year. We started it inside and then just wheeled it in and out until it got warm enough to leave it outside. And then bringing culture together with the art, the food. And this is a social dance that we hosted. It was learning how to do social dances. And oftentimes people think, of art as just being something physical you create, not something physical that you do. You can't necessarily do a social dance and then go home and have a result from that other than that new knowledge in your head. And this is all of the different teas that I have in my tea garden. They were on display this spring, and I'm looking forward to gathering some more this summer. So first of all, what is art? art is so many things. It's expression, creativity. Art is very human. While animals can create art, oftentimes it's interpreted as art by humans. You know, it's not like an elephant is looking for a paintbrush to paint a canvas, or any of the other animals that they've taught how to paint. It's the humans kind of teaching that to other species. So I really think art is human. It can be very spiritual. Sometimes people just need a little, the ability to express who they are, and sometimes even express their spirituality. It can be very individual, but it can also be something that you take a part of as a group. So I think art can be both, individual, but also a group exercise. It can be physical. So this is one of the social dances, and it's a potato dance, but they didn't have potatoes, so they were using apples. And this is a student and her daughter. And it also creates understanding. Sometimes there may be social or class divisions, even just cultural divisions between people. And art kind of cuts down some of those boundaries, and it connects us. So it creates that understanding from one culture to another. As I was making notes for this presentation, the one word that kept coming up over and over, and that I tried really hard not to put in the presentation on every single slide, was connection. But art creates connection, whether it's with yourself or with, with something else. It creates connection just between different types of art, but the food sovereignty is also something that creates connection. And I will talk a little more about kind of how that connection works with, food and with plants. But the library, I really feel like what we try to create in the library is a culturally competent space. And that means having comfortable space where people can connect and, have those conversations that you might not find in a book or in any other place. So it connects families, one family to another. Oftentimes when we're doing art projects, once we get familiar with what we're doing and we're just kind of doing the art and talking, we start talking about our families, who our families are. Maybe, my grandma did this type of art and this is how she did it. So it's perpetuating some oral knowledge and oral history. It's creating relationships where maybe you didn't really know the people at that program, but you took the chance, you went there, you met some new people, you now have relationships. I also think the library is so lucky because as we hold events and as we have different programs, we're creating more relationships in our community and even beyond. So then that leads right to the community. It builds community as, like-minded people, whether they're students who just need, time to decompress, or there might be elders who are very isolated at home. It's creating new communities within our larger community that can sometimes feel a little lonely. And then it can also connect you to the world. Especially in the library, we've been doing a lot of, not currently, but we were doing a lot of online programming for the arts. And it really connected Blackfeet across the United States. It was really amazing. One of my best stories from our online art programs was a lady in Texas Blackfeet, they were doing beading. So she asked, can my parents join? And then she said, while they were beading, while they were in the classes, her parents started talking about the reservation, about their family up here. And she said, my parents never talk about that. But that art gave them, gave this Blackfeet person that connection that they've really never had with our community. And so, it does make a worldwide community. So with the garden, I call it an experimental garden. What are we doing different? Probably not anything. I don't really expect the things that we're doing have never been thought of before. We're definitely not growing plants nobody's seen or heard of. But the experiment comes from a group of people, the staff in the library. We know nothing about gardening. And so a lot of what we've done has been either self-taught, it's been through experimenting. Does this work? Can we grow things inside the library? And then, okay, it didn't work this year, but we're really trying to, our big goal was to get a pumpkin. I've heard other people in the community say, I just can't grow a pumpkin. Our growing season's too short. And it took us 3 years, but last year we got a pumpkin. And I feel a little bad because this year I chose not to plant a pumpkin, but I think that there are other vegetables now that we're like, can we grow these? The garden, is it useful in the library? Is it more than just staff self-expression or staff connection? And I think it really is. It actually draws people to our door. What's going on outside? What are all those plants out there? Or some days I'm out there building things. What are you doing? And inside the library, people kind of see something that doesn't look like a house plant, so they start asking, what is this? What are you guys doing? Why are you doing this? And so I think the usefulness of it is that that kind of passive mode of transmitting information to the community. Culturally we aren't gardeners, but we definitely tended wild plants. You pick it this year, maybe you come here and pick it the next year. Or, like with rose hips, I found that if you make sure and pick the berries, they come back more abundant the next year. But when you leave them alone thinking, oh, I'm not gonna pick these berries because, you're always told not to pick everything. Those plants that I've left alone look a little scrawnier than the ones that I picked from the last year. So I think the usefulness is just perpetuating that information. Is it meaningful? It's definitely meaningful to the staff. We have a very big connection to the garden, and it's also created a big connection to each other. And how does it connect us? Kind of talked a little bit about just people coming in and asking questions. And is this food sovereignty? I've had a lot of conversations with other community members who are doing a lot of work, and I think that by understanding how to grow, teaching other people how to do it, showing them, giving them an opportunity to not just watch something grow, but to partake in what we get at the end. We were talking about really that taking control of where your food comes from is food sovereignty. So I sometimes think food sovereignty is a very big and high level idea. It really helped me bring it down to a level that I think once we name something like what we're doing is food sovereignty, it really gives people ownership and pride in what they're doing. So the relationships with plants. I have definitely created a lot closer relationships with plants than I used to have. You might work the soil before you plant or maybe you're working it afterwards, after you harvest. The physical act of planting, understanding how to plant, how to put seeds in the ground, or how to plant something with roots. Tending is very, very, I think, instructional and helpful, because you can see every stage of that plant as it's growing, so that the next year when the plant isn't doing as well, maybe you understand, well, this is what was happening last year. These were our conditions. Let's create that hypothesis and call this an experiment. What are we doing differently? And then we're taking note of what works and what doesn't. So building relationships, I probably sound a little bit like a weirdo, but I really build relationships with the plants that I tend. And I go out every day to the garden, whether I'm watering or not, and I look at what's growing. I talk to them. The beans are growing really fast, so I'm really encouraging them to climb up the little ladders I made for them. The beets are looking really amazing. There's one little teeny tiny thing of lettuce, so I'm encouraging the lettuce to grow. And people walk by and I'm talking to my garden, but I think that also kind of draws them in, like, oh, who are you talking to? What's going on? And so I think those plant relationships, just like having a relationship with, if you're eating meat, having a relationship with your cow, having a relationship with your chickens, you're eating their eggs later. It's really important to know where your food's coming from, and to know that, did your food have a good life? What is it going to do to help sustain you, because you help sustain it? So really kind of a circle. Troubleshooting is always hard, because I'm not a gardener, so I'm like, why is this happening? But then that forces me to either go find information, or a great thing is, because we have great gardeners on the reservation, people will come up and say, I noticed that your beans are doing this, maybe you need to add a little more nitrogen to your soil, or they're giving us their knowledge and what they've learned throughout the years. They might just say, oh, these are too close together. You might want to thin them out. Harvesting, I grew up on a ranch, and to me, harvesting was really like being in a combine, and you're threshing the entire field, and then it's done. The great thing about harvesting your own garden, your own food, is that it's something that you have to do consistently. Some of the plants will keep providing vegetables for you if you just harvest them. Lettuce, if you cut it off and leave the base in the ground, it will grow another head of lettuce. Beans will grow and grow and grow if you pick them until it gets too cold for them to grow anymore. And some of the harvesting really is final, like the pumpkin. It grows, and then at the end, it's one pumpkin. You take it, there's no more pumpkins coming back. And then you're preparing the food, not only for consumption, but you're preparing to, how do we plant it again? How do we make sure that we're not having to buy seeds every year? Maybe something's growing really well here. It might have got, cross-pollinated, or, of course I'm not that big of a plant scientist, but once you find a plant that's hardy enough to last through our season, then, you want to make sure that is what you plant every single year. And of course, the consumption of the food that you're growing is super important. It creates that relationship where the next year, the pumpkin didn't ripen. How do we make sure that it ripens better? And, what do we have to do to assist with, having that consumption more meaningful and more nutritious to us? I think both gardening and art are really big components of mental health. The things I put here are things that affect our mental health. Everything going on in the world around us today, the news, sometimes it's so hard to just even leave your house because everything seems so negative. Our community, there are definite challenges in our community, and how do we do better? And that feeling of overwhelming, maybe dread or worry about what's going on, feeling like there's nothing you can do to make a difference. And sometimes personal, I'm definitely my own worst mental health enemy. I worried about this presentation for like days, and now that I'm here, I'm like, oh, why was I so worried about this? So, but when you're tending your plants, a garden, when you're creating that art and you're with other like-minded people, it really kind of takes you away from what's going on in the world. It can help you actually come together to talk about ways to make the community better, and even just providing space for community to come in and do something positive is helping with that mental health image of our community. And for you personally, taking something away, whether that's food or just general knowledge, or you're taking away a painting, a beaded earrings or something like that, it really gives you a sense of accomplishment, which in return then really helps with your mental health. And I've been remiss in not telling you what's going on. These are jalapenos that we grew, and we grew them inside. You can see that it's snowing outside. And so these grew all the way until November. So that was one of our experiments. Can we grow food throughout the winter? We have a 3-month growing period and 9 months where we don't have any access to our own fresh fruit and vegetables. So can we figure out ways to not only grow them inside, but to be able to help other people grow them in their houses? Of course, the library is really big, not everyone has the space we have. So we've been trying to figure out ways to model this for other people. And growth, obviously in my brain I'm like, oh, plant growth, but personal growth, how does art and food sovereignty lead to that growth? And why should the library be a part of that? I think as I was explaining, you become more aware of maybe yourself, of the things that you can do. Maybe you mentally have said, I cannot draw a dog to save my life. And then you take a drawing workshop, and at the end, you might not have the best dog, but you got a dog, like, wow, more than a stick dog, Growing with your knowledge of how to take care of yourself better through the food sovereignty and through the planting, it really, I think, for me personally, it's really made my worldview grow a lot more than I started the planting during the pandemic. We have a USDA extension garden here that's fairly large, and our student interns weren't allowed on campus, so I volunteered to help. And that was the very first time I had ever planted anything, harvested anything. And since then, it's like, this was wonderful for me. I think it would be great for other people as well. So, bringing it back to the library and that exchange of knowledge in the library is so important. So, looks like we've done a lot of really cool stuff, but how do you create these opportunities, either, for people that or for your community? Definitely grants are a big part of it. We had an art grant that really paid for a lot of stuff, things that we would have never been able to afford before. Bringing a lot of cultural art into the library, because oftentimes cultural art is extremely expensive. It involves materials that we no longer gather, and so purchasing it from someone who does is pretty expensive. So that was really great, but I know that we don't operate with grants most of the time. Donations, we get a lot of physical donations. Can you use these 3 trash bags full of yarn? I'm like, we'll figure it out. Still got all that yarn, but I've got ideas now. We have a local organization from Whitefish who created that partnership. First, it was just, here are things people donated to Blackfeet at Heart, to Stumptown Gallery. We don't have room for them. We can't use 3 garbage bags full of yarn. And so at first, it kind of felt a little bit like, are they just dumping their trash on us? But I never think that way, because I'm always like, ooh, we can use it. And if we can't, then I'll put it out and other people can use it. That's one thing we do in our library, is we never just trash things. If people want it, we got a bunch of really old sewing machines donated, and I didn't have the time or energy to figure out, do they work? We put it out and they were gone within 2 hours. So I think that's amazing that we can offer that opportunity at home for other people. Eventually they started saying, you know what, it doesn't make sense that we're giving you supplies. You're the one who knows what you need, what's been, your stock is low, or you want to try a different class. And so they started donating actual money to us. And that's really meaningful in our library, because we're only funded through the college. So I don't spend any money on anything that's not academic. So all of these cool programs, all of the fun things that we do, some of it comes out of pocket, but some of it's just like the donations, and what we're paying is our time and effort. So, because we get paid to work in the library, that's the way, we're kind of using that academic funding to meet the community need as well. Volunteers, while we had the grant, we were so happy to be able to pay people well. That's definitely not something we can normally do. And so a lot of people want to just volunteer. They see the importance of having the exchange of information, the trying something new or creating something. And so some people will volunteer and just trying it out. We'll have ideas like, hey, let's make mini backrests. I'd love to learn how to make a full-size backrest, use willows, but we don't really have that knowledge. But we went and borrowed the backrest that's in Bikini Studies and looked at it, figured out, how is it created? What's the shape? How are the sticks tied together? And then we bought a bunch of skewers and cut them up, and then had a mini backrest class with just regular kitchen skewers. And oftentimes, because we don't expect people to put their time in for free, we're leading a lot of the art classes or art programs. And literally that morning, we try it out as a team, and then we present it to the community in the evening. Creating the opportunity to learn if you're not here or you can't be here. If you can't make it, but you still want to know how to make that parfleche. We've been doing a little more internet learning with our community and with our wider community. So again, community. I think I wrote community in another slide. But really, both of these topics, the art, the food sovereignty, bringing them together brings us together. It helps you find that community. It helps build a community. It helps you feel like you belong in a community, or it helps you create your own new community. And I really love this picture. This is from about 3 weeks ago when we planted our garden, maybe closer to 4 weeks ago now. All of my staff were out there, our hands in the dirt. Joe's not there because he's taking the picture for us. But it was so meaningful that even amongst my staff, we've really created our own micro community in the library. People often ask, how do you make your staff do these things? And I don't make them do anything. They're excited, they want to participate, they want to teach, they want to bring opportunities in. And it used to just be me, like, I want to do this. And now it's so exciting to watch them want to do something different and want to take charge of, I'm going to bring this program in. And so, it's not just creating their own community, but creating kind of that, building themselves up and feeling better about, what they can do. And then, of course, being at Medicine Spring Library, being here on the Blackfeet Reservation, and this being one of the 6 core themes of our mission here at Blackfeet Community College is bringing culture and language into the library. How does art, how does the garden, how does that bring in culture? And a lot of times it helps us tell stories, whether it's that oral knowledge that we're passing down, this is how my grandma used to do it. Or, I'm working with rose hips and someone came by and said, oh, and told me their family story about rose hips and how they use them. It sometimes is just while you're sitting around, you're BSing and you're creating new stories, new connections through, through that storytelling type of connection. So you're connecting to the culture. A lot of people are like, I really want to learn how to do this, but I don't know where to start. I want to make moccasins, but I don't even know how to buy, the materials. So we've had some really basic workshops like how to measure your feet for moccasins, trying to help people build that knowledge to eventually take a moccasin making class. It really helps you learn some of your culture. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but by learning, what that really does is that helps perpetuate, because you're excited, you're going to tell that next person, do you know I just learned about berries, about these rose hips, how we use them. I'm always excited to tell people what I've learned in some of the cultural storytelling about rose hips in particular. It really leads to multi-generational learning, and that is so cultural. It's so Blackfeet to have everyone involved, that we never say no to kids. We might tell parents this might not be a good opportunity for your children to participate in, but if you bring them, we'll have something for them to do. And of course, pre-pandemic, every single program we had, we'd always have at least one multi-generational family attend, and it wasn't always the same family. Grandmas with their grandkids, or even 3 generations coming in together. And while they might not have realized how significant that was, I think when I look around the room at who's in the workshop or in the program, it's really meaningful, and it really makes me feel like we're perpetuating our Blackfeet culture through having space where multi-generational families can come in. A big part of culture is just trying it. With culture, with language, you can't say, I don't know how to do it perfectly, because then you'll never do it. So if you try, and we create that spirit of trying is important, trying is a part of the process, trying, and maybe in your mind you might think failing, but trying and not getting the results you're looking for is so important, especially when we're talking about culture and language. So then you try again. And sometimes by the 3rd try, you're becoming, a little more culturally competent. You're getting better at the art you're creating. You're getting better at the food you're planting, making better plans, how to do these things. And then, of course, the most important part of being a learner is in becoming that instructor. One of the neatest things I've seen is in beading classes where people will be like, I don't know how to bead. They show up and they know how to bead, but they don't feel confident about it. After a couple classes, I see them helping the person next to them that truly doesn't know how to bead. And I don't think they realize that they just became an instructor and that they're perpetuating that knowledge, and you know, they might know about the history of beading in Blackfeet society, but they don't feel comfortable with the actual process of beading. And that's been really amazing to see through a lot of the programs that we've been doing in the library. So I'm not sure if you feel like the library is the place to have that community, to have that, that oral and physical knowledge come together. But here at Medicine Spring Library, we really feel like that's a big part of how we perpetuate our culture, how we perpetuate the creation and the, I guess, a community building and moving forward. So this was just in April or May this year, and you can see, you know, our garden beds. We've since moved them. You're welcome to, after the session, if you want to come over to the library. We'll have some snacks and some coffee and iced tea. It's on the schedule as a open house. I'm not sure anyone's going to show up, but I'm not going to be sad if nobody eats my Rice Krispie treats. I'll bring them home. But you'll see that talking about this being experimental, we've changed the way the actual beds are, because what we found out last year was having a bed on the south side in the little wing cave that is built by having our two buildings together. Nothing grew there, and the soil was hard as a rock. So we've since moved them both over, and we're trying another new thing that I hope will help give our garden longevity beyond the first snow of the next season. So do you guys have any questions?
You mentioned partners, and I was wondering what partnerships have paid off for you in the community the most, especially with food sovereignty. I was wondering about that.
Sometimes it's partnerships that you didn't realize we're already kind of there. So Fast Blackfeet, they do a lot of, there are like food bank, but they also do instruction. And that's actually how I got my traditional tea garden, was through a pilot project they had. And I said, I'll do it. And it's amazing the things I've learned that I can now teach other people about that traditional tea. The gathering, we had a actual planted garden, and then we learned how to gather it wild. There's another organization in town that doesn't really have a space. It's a Piikani Health Lodge, and they do a lot of regenerative grazing, and so it's really working with them gives us access to people who might never come into the library, like farmers and ranchers. And then it might seem really obvious. It should have been obvious. It wasn't for me. But we have a USDA extension here on campus. The college is a 1994 land grant institution, and so we're eligible for USDA funds. And they always seem so separate. And last year I started talking to them and said, what if we mirrored some of the things, you know, you're doing a large scale, but we're doing small scale where we're doing the teaching. And that's helped pay for some of the actual soil, the raised beds. And sometimes it's just their knowledge, you know. They have a lot more knowledge about the gardening and the food sovereignty, and just passing that on to us, who then pass it on to our community members who are in the library. There are potential bigger partners that we really only have because we have the partnerships with the other community organizations. We got seeds from a nursery in Kalispell, I believe, but they sent it to the Beginning Health Lodge, and they said, "Oh, you see so many more people than we do, so can you distribute these seeds for us?" And so I think with the food sovereignty, creating those local partnerships are the most important. Might be good to have a national partner, but they're really not going to know our needs like our other community members are going to. So I think food sovereignty really starts at home, and partnerships should start at home as well. And hopefully one of us has some funding for it. So that's kind of where the USDA Extension Office is helping us with some of the things we're trying.
What programs have been most popular?
So we've done a lot of beading, and then we've also done a lot of ribbon skirts. People are really into a lot of the material, using the sewing machine. But we're trying some new things that we don't have expertise in to maybe try to bring new community members in, like whittling. I'd love to learn how to carve something out of wood. There's wood burning. I know that we have extremely talented wood burning artists in our community. We bought a very small pottery wheel, bought a bunch of clay and a really small kiln. It's super cute. And I think just even having those things available, people are really excited to learn something new. So while the tried and true programs like the beading, like the ribbon skirt making are important, I think it helps other people get in the door for something they've never done before.
Sorry I came in so late.
No problem.
Chatting with the other person in another session. So I'm curious about whether you do connections with the public schools in town as well and in other parts of the reservation. Do you have artists or horticulturists go out to those schools to work with the kids, or does everybody come here for your programs?
So we don't do a lot of that kind of outreach into the schools, especially because they have funded programs. But we have been able to do things like sponsor one of the schools. All of their employees came to one of our art programs one night. And that was a huge trial and error because we weren't prepared for that many people. We had enough seats. We only had like 3 pairs of scissors. We now have 20 pairs of scissors. So I think that being an adult learning institution, I think having that connection with their instructors is a little more important than having the kids directly, because then things like during our quick draw several years ago, one of the teachers had an art club at the elementary school, and she brought her art club over so they could participate in the quick draw. And then for one of our activities, we had the high school art teacher come down and help us learn. And so I think that's important, because when those kids who were in the art class come to this next level, they're like, hey, I recognize this, I already fit in. So we do a little bit of outreach, but it's usually just the library getting the word out, and we might go on location, but it's never really in conjunction with the schools and maybe that's a go it alone attitude, but I think we're getting better at creating those partnerships and those connections that we're not going alone so much anymore. Yeah, so I try really hard to meet the needs of our community as far as space and time. If people I almost do no programs during the day because students are in class, people are at work. So we try to have evening activities with at least some snacks because, you know, you just got off of work, you don't want to go bead. You still have to cook dinner, you know, but, you know, you bring your family with you or you don't and have a little bit of me time. And then you're not worrying about like, I'm starving, you know, why did I come here? And then other organizations will ask, can you do this on Saturday? Because nobody can make it during the week. Nobody wants to stay after work. And so as long as our community gives, or we give our community a little bit of heads up, we're really happy to meet during the weekends, to meet during the time that they have to meet. And I think that's really important, is just understanding that community need. All right, well, thank you so much. And you're welcome to come to the library.